Yesterday, I saw some argumentation by Moses and others on Twitter about the overtime rule set in Counter Strike currently. Because in the past, we sort of had this, I think it was fairly standard that it was MR3, 10K, so 3 rounds and an overtime half, so 6 rounds maximum total, and a starting money of $10,000. Where it's transitioned over to MR3 16K, which allows, obviously it gives the both teams both more money to play with. And some people, like Moses was saying yesterday, was saying that that system is suboptimal because you can make too many consecutive expensive buys, double up setups, auto sniper, full utility, all 3 rounds of the half, where there should be economic trade-offs. If you should be taking a risk when you buy double ops, just as you do in regulation. Now, this sort of argument is often countered by something like saying, no, it should be 16K because we want players to be able to buy whatever they want. They should be at their max strength. I think that's generally, I saw Lurpus make that argument yesterday. And I think when people usually discuss this, it usually comes down to some sort of very specific, calculated discussion about what the ideal format would be. Is it MR5? Is it MR3? Is it 12K starting money? Is it 5K? Whatever. It's about what the specifics should be in the game that would be the best in their own minds. But I don't think people get at the sort of fundamental difference, and this is sort of what I want to go over in this video, between the two arguments that I see most commonly, the Lurpus argument and the Moses argument. The Lurpus argument, the argument that it should be max money so players can, or infinite money so players don't have to eco, players don't have in the third round possibly, that it should be full strength buys coming at each other, is essentially an argument for overtime as a purified or distilled version of the game itself. To acknowledge the Counter-Strike in itself, in its purest form, is gun rounds, and I think we can all agree that that's the highest level of competition, full gun rounds between both sides. That's where teams are they're more evenly suited, and that's where it's really decide who's the better team. There's no lopsided advantages in terms of weaponry, and teams can best showcase their ability, right? So we should just have gun rounds. That overtime should be a distilled, purified version of the game itself. The other version of this is that the Moses version, where there should be economic trade-offs, is instead a view of overtime as an extension of regulation, as an additional set of regular play. So overtime as just extended regular play. You add more time to the clock, and you see hopefully one team figure out. It's shown that one team's better than another team. So if you want to simulate normal play, if you want the game just to be extended, you want the same economic trade-offs in place. You don't want to distill the game down. You want to have the game as similar to regulation play as you can. Now, in reality, because the way Counter-Strike works with the economy, that would have to mean a full another 15 rounds on each half, which isn't ideal because you generally want the tiebreaker to be time condensed just because of formatting and stuff. Because, if it's not 15 rounds, then, pistol, you have a starting money, it's not like the pistol round thing, then, it's not the same thing. There's not, pistol rounds aren't rewarded to the same degree, anti-ecos aren't going to be rewarded to the same degree, force buys aren't going to be rewarded to the same degree, gun rounds aren't going to be rewarded to the same degree. There's different weights involved. So basically with the Moses version is, okay, we have to accept that it's abbreviated, but it's sort of a simulation of normal play in that we still have some economic aspect, that there should be trade-offs. That the trade-off should be, if you do an expensive setup in the third round, there should be risk. If you do expensive buys the first 2 rounds, there should be some sort of repercussion in the third, so you can't just buy whatever you want, because in regulation, people just don't buy whatever they want. They know when they buy double ops that that's putting them in a bad economic situation if they lose that round. So that should still be in place. Overtime should simulate, replicate, reflect regulated in regulation play, normal play. It's two completely divergent points of view. It's a discussion about what overtime is rather than what's the best version of overtime. Now, some people, if you're in one camp, that if you're a Moses person, if you're a extended version of regular play person, you can decide within that camp what's the right amount of starting money, accepting the fact that you need some sort of trade-off. Is it 16? Is it 10K? Is it 12K? Is it 8K? What should the trade-offs be in that scenario? And you can talk about the amount of rounds and all that sort of stuff. Now, you can do the same thing with the Lurpus version, where you can argue, well, okay, yeah, maybe you should be able to buy best weapons every round, but you shouldn't be able to buy 2 weapons, so you can like try to get an op pick at the beginning of the round. Then, okay, the op didn't work, and I'm going to switch to rifle, and you have all 5 guys opping double doors on dust 2 the first or auto snipering the dust 2 doors the first 10 seconds of a round, like you used to see. If in the 15th round, if a team had a lot of money on the T side, on the T side, that sort of thing. So, I mean, you can make it so that like you can only buy one weapon, but you can buy whatever you want. There's no monetary restrictions on that. I mean, you can have those discussions within the camps, but the idea that these camps are going to somehow be able to figure out with the discussion the details seems to me to be sort of a futile proposition. I just don't know how these two sides are going to be able to converge, because they have for some innate reason, maybe because of their background in sports or what they're used to, what they see, their own personality or culture, some bizarre internal reason, they just favor one side of the argument rather than the other. And I sort of had this problem discussing the Valve coaching rule in the past, where I thought there was sort of this disconnect with people. I try to highlight this in an ESPN article I wrote, where there's these people, a lot of people, like the vast majority of people online I just saw would say, well, the Valve coaching rule change, allowing coaches, restricting coaches from talking during rounds and in freeze time was inherently bad because it limits the standard of play, because coaches don't have as much of an opportunity to boost the performance of their team. That's inherently wrong. Now, that's a perspective that says that the most important, the thing we're trying to maximize with the rule set and the circumstances of the event is level play, where someone else might come to the thing is like, well, what in essence we're doing in Counter-Strike is not to elevate Counter-Strike esports is not to illustrate the level of Counter-Strike to its maximum, but to have a competition that's as most competitive possible, because in the end it's just a computer game. It should be about competition. And then you might want to say, well, we should really, if it's really about 2 teams competing, we should limit outside influences. We shouldn't have impartial referees. We shouldn't have a bunch of coaching staff, which should be between the players. And that's sort of the Valve position. Now you can critique that and say that the coaches didn't have such a crazy impact, and Valve's proposition that it was becoming a 6-on-6 game was a far-fetched argument. I mean, you can say all that, but there's a fundamental disconnect there again with these sides. One saying that there should be a purity in competition, there should be a sort of a more closely knit 5v5 game, and there's another side that's like more purely about the game itself and maximizing the level play and the actual game to bring the game to the highest level possible. And in this article, I didn't really know how to bridge that. My instinct was like, well, let's go to traditional sports. Like maybe this will provide something, even though, esports and sports have these diverging, they're not the same thing, obviously. There's diverging aspects to them. There's sports that are more continuous that coaches can have a less of effect of in a minute-to-minute sense, because they can't tell what players to do. They have to. It's a continuous motion of going from place to place. Where in something like American football or baseball, that you can tell the pitcher exactly which pitch to throw or the quarterback which play to do. The coaches have a lot of input in between segments or bursts of action. I thought maybe Counter-Strike was in this line, and then, maybe coaches should be allowed to interject in between rounds or something like this. But, I mean, you sort of get to this problem where, well, what is the founding basis of which these sports decided? Initially, why is tennis, say, more strictly anti-coach, more about a mano-a-mano, 1v1 sort of thing, a gladiatorial sort of event where there's very limited coaching, especially in the men's game, right? During the actual match. Like, just because these more prestigious, longer lasting, more historic, with, more historical precedents, more history, why, just because they do it, just because it's tradition in those disciplines doesn't mean it's correct. And you sort of just back to where you began, in that it seems irreconcilable, in that it seems like two different philosophies. And I don't know how to bridge this in the Valve coaching rule situation and the overtime rule situation. It just seems like we're having a shades of gray argument where unless it's universally seen that 14K is better than 16K in somehow for both parties, that it will move that way. Or it seems like maybe arbitrarily one tournament director is in one camp and switches it over, and maybe that tournament director, say Valve or ESL, has enough force where all tournaments want to move it over. It seems extremely arbitrary in how it's being decided now, and I really don't know how to. I'm really sort of struggling at that disconnect. I don't know how you would get someone, how to bridge these two concerns. And I don't think the argument is so simple as, well, 13K is better than 16K because there's economic risks. Because from the other school, they don't see that as even valid to begin with. The answer has to align with their ends. The ends are different, so their methodologies to getting these different ends, they might randomly agree, but it's just there's some disconnect. I don't know how you would solve that.